fiancés. Thank you so much for tuning into the HelloPrenup podcast, where we discuss all things finances, relationships, trends, and of course, prenups. And as people who spend all day, every day, thinking about how we can improve the lives of couples all over the world at any stage in their relationship, we thrive in helping engaged couples start their marriage off on the right foot with empathy, compassion, and of course, protection. Our guest today is divorce and family law attorney Denise Rappaport Isaacs. Denise has over 30 years of experience representing both men and women, helping to resolve unique financial and child issues with integrity and compassion. She has the expertise to guide spouses through the most anxious times to maintain their sense of security and control over the cumbersome, lengthy litigation process. She settles the majority of cases, utilizing her expertise to negotiate and mediate out-of-court settlements after rigorous research into the parties' finances. She is experienced in all areas of family law, including complex equitable distribution of marital assets, alimony, child support, paternity, post-judgment modification matters, and of course, marriage settlement agreements. Without further ado, here is Denise Rappaport Isaacs. Hi, Denise. Thank you so much for joining us today on the HelloPrenup podcast. We are so excited to talk to you. First and foremost, what inspired you to get into family law and become a divorce attorney?
I had an aunt who got divorced. Her husband left her, and she had 3 children, and she would call the house crying all the time. And it was very traumatic for the entire family and very traumatic for me because I adored her. And I always wanted to help her. And so that's what got me into divorce. And in the 80s, I've been practicing for more than 40 years. In the 80s, I worked in the New York State legislature, and I helped pass the equitable distribution law, which changed from a title, whoever was on the title of the asset got the asset, as opposed to, is it marital or not? Was it acquired during the during the marriage with marital funds? So, and since I did that, everyone sent me family law cases, and so that's how everything started.
Wow, that's incredible. And so now that you've been doing it for quite some time, what would you tell younger you as you're entering family law, now that you've been into it 40 years later and you've seen so many different cases?
I would tell myself not to be my client's mother, that I needed to step back and get some distance and be able to see the other side's point of view so that I can understand it better, so that we can negotiate better settlements instead of only listening to my client. Because there's always 2 sides to a story, and it just depends on your viewpoint. And you need, as a lawyer who's representing one side, you still need to understand and empathize with the other side, because once you can understand them, then what you can do is you can help negotiate so much better. You don't want a lawyer who only wants to fight. You need somebody who has who has some experience and who understands the process, because it's a really tough process. Getting divorced is just, on a Richter scale, it's really high up there. It is terrible. And it goes on for a period of time. So if you have an advisor, a lawyer advisor, who takes a step back and thinks about things and can advise you, it's much better. It's much better. But we don't want to talk about divorce. We want to talk about prenups.
Yes. That's so funny, because at HelloPrenup, we don't talk about the D word. The D word is not relevant, because if you do marriage right and you go into it on the same page, the argument is we don't even need to talk about it, right? Because it's really about making sure that we get on the same page prior to marriage to make sure that we stay on the same page while we're married. So talk to me about prenups. Do you recommend every couple gets a prenup?
That is a question that each person has to answer for themselves. People who have nothing and never are going to have anything, they don't need prenups. People who can't even conceive of a prenup or a reason for a prenup don't need prenups. It's people who have experienced or understand that marriage isn't forever. Those are the people who need to consider things. People who either in their second marriages have assets that they want to protect, or someone who has already accumulated assets or inherited assets and they want to protect those. Someone who's in a family business, they want to protect those assets. So those are the people. Oh, and they're the other people. Talking about liabilities, those are assets. Let's talk about liabilities. People who have liabilities like student loans, like doctors with $350,000 student loans. And other people have gone and have student debt. Those are things that you really need to get into. And you want to wall those off as a fairness kind of thing. My best advice to people before they get married is they need a budget. And in addition to a budget, they need to list their assets and they need to list their liabilities. You need to know how much your spouse, your future spouse, owes. If they owe a lot of money, it could be $5,000 a month at 18 to 23%. And maybe that's what you want to first deal with in the marriage to take care of. A prenup tells you how much someone's assets and liabilities are. But every single couple that's getting married needs to find out. And they also need to find out, are they supporting parents? Are they supporting other children? Even if they're coming, and this is the first marriage, you need to know what the other person's financial responsibilities are. And then you think you're marrying somebody who's making a hell of a lot of money. And then what happens is you find out that the Lambo is really $2,300 a month, and this and that and this and that and this and that. And then all of a sudden, there's no money. Okay, there's no money. You both need to be powerful in your marriage and both make financial decisions in the marriage.
The fact that you brought up the fairness meter is really important because of power in the marriage. So I have been married before. I've also been divorced before. And I've gone through the traditional prenup process. And I married a much wealthier man who basically served me a prenup, and it was very boilerplate. And it said, in the event of nothing.
You get nothing.
Nothing. And at the time, I was pregnant with our first child, and I had very humble assets, very humble. Like I just was entering my career. I think I was making like $50,000 a year, and I'm about to have this child. And there was no conversation of, in the event that it doesn't work out, Lauren can maybe have the marital home to take care of the kids or something. It was like, no, you're walled off no matter what, even if we have kids, even if we haven't. So my question to you is, when people enter the prenup process, how do you know how to talk about it? What are the questions that people should be asking each other before they enter the family law phase?
Let's talk about when you decide that you're going to get married. So when you decide that you're going to get married and you're not on equal financial footing, you want to talk about what's fair. Okay, because what's fair today may not be fair in 5 years when you have children. It may not be fair in 15 years when you married someone who is 40 and now they're 55. They cannot end up with nothing. There's the haves sometimes and the have-nots. The haves have to realize that they're not going to lose everything that they have, but they have to think about fairness, because you don't want the prenup to be a road to the divorce. Having a prenup that has that you're never going to do anything for the other spouse. You're never going to make sure that they're financially secure. They're not going to have an IRA or a 401k. They're not going to be able to touch your income, touch your assets, touch the rental income, touch anything, and they're cut off from alimony. That is a road to divorce. It's just a road to divorce, and it is wrong. It is absolutely wrong.
I could not agree more. And in my personal experience, I did. I waived alimony. I also quit my job during our marriage. So I had no income coming in, and I was financially dependent on him for all of the finances, which created a huge power imbalance, right? Because now I didn't hold any cards. I had no leverage. And so it really was inevitably the beginning of the end for us. So what advice do you have for someone that they just found the love of their life, they're about to get engaged? How do you start asking questions like, how much debt do you have? Do you just come out and say it?
When my son and daughter-in-law were getting married, I gave them a budget to fill out, which was how much money they're going to need in the future to live on. That's something that everyone... There's no, you have to know if you're going to get married, how we're going to live and what we're going to pay for. And in addition to that, do you have any debt that needs to be paid for? The first 2 or 3 pages are the budget. You pay for this, you pay for the autos, you pay for gas. How much does insurance cost? How much does health insurance cost? What is your rent? What is your mortgage? And then you get into how much do we have to pay towards debt? I don't know how to say this, but you need to know what the other person is earning. And if they have megabucks, they can tell you that I can pay for everything. Well, if they can pay for everything, they're going to want a prenup. And in the prenup, we'll get to negotiating a prenup, a fair prenup later. But, you asked me about you're getting married. If you're going to get married, you need to know the finances. In the majority of cases, you need to know if there's going to be enough money left over to have a life. People are getting married at the beginning. They don't have a lot of money. They have student loans. They need to budget for the student loans, but they also need to have a couple of months, like 3 months worth of security money in case one person loses their job. But then beyond that, when you get into your 30s, that's when you're interested in 401ks. That's when you're interested in investments. Maybe you are at the end of your 20s, but in your 30s, that's what you're interested in. You want financial security. They don't need millions and billions of dollars. They need to be able to retire. And so when you're 45 years old, you have 22 years to earn some money and get your financial in order. But if you're starting at 45, it is really hard. So if you're going to be married for 10 years, you got married at 35 or you got married at 30 and now you're 40, being financially safe, having some financial security is very important. Stay-at-home moms. Let's just talk about stay-at-home moms, because I just did a couple of videos on the perils of the stay-at-home mom. Now, it's not just someone who hasn't been working in the marriage. It's also someone like you were who, how do you continue working when you have a newborn? How can you think? And what if you don't get 3 or 4 months off from your job? And then at the end of 3 months, it goes like this. What do you do then? You have to hire someone else to take care of your baby. You may decide, and lots and lots and lots of husbands. And I represent 50% husbands and 50% wives. People on my social media are constantly telling me that I'm in favor of husbands. I'm in favor of wives. How can you do this? Half haves and half have nots. And it's a question of negotiation. It's a question of fairness. I've had 2 people who didn't get married because one person was asking for too much. Okay, just absolute out of bounds, crazy. Okay. And the other one, it was the have. Okay. That was the have not. And then the other one, the have, wasn't giving anything and didn't have any empathy for how his wife to be, after they had children, was going to end up with nothing. That child and that mother who gets nothing is going to end up who knows where, living on the poor side of town, or wanting to move to live near her parents. There are so many couples where the husbands and wives decide she should stay home for the first 3 years to take care of the baby, so that the baby grows up in a home and sleeps in the same bed at night and has no anxiety. Okay, that is the perfect case. So if 20% of marriages end in divorce, 20% marriages end in divorce in the first 2 years. And people who want to have babies right away. There's a lot of people who need to think about this. And in terms of fairness, thinking about, well, if she stays home, I'll give, and is not going to be working, or she is home. You need to think of these things in advance. Okay, so it's not just no alimony. It's, well, if you have a baby and we agree that you should stay home, fine. And then he thinks that, because it would be the husband who would think, right, you can't stay home anymore because we're getting divorced. So there we have in the agreement some financial considerations, moving out monies, and that we have to think about it. And it's terrible to think about a divorce, but that's what you get in a prenup for. Fairness is very important. Do you want to get married to someone who has no empathy for you, who doesn't want the best for you, who doesn't want you to be financially safe? If someone wants to enter into a prenuptial agreement and doesn't want you to be safe and wants to give you nothing, and then after a year, 2 years, 10 years, 50 years, you end up with nothing, is this the person you wanted to get married to? I don't think so.
What do you say to the people who say, oh, we don't need to worry about a prenup because state laws, we'll just let the state figure it out? What do you say to those people?
I say that the state says that every state has a prenup already. So you already have a prenup. So you need to find out in your state what the prenup is. And then after that, you have to decide if you want to go along with the prenup. So what you need to do is you both need to go to a family lawyer and have them tell you, if you get divorced, what happens to all the money that was accumulated during the marriage, all the money that was commingled. I have had a number of women come in and say, oh, I don't want anything that he has. Oh, I'll sign the agreement. Even if you're telling me not to sign the agreement, I'm going to sign. I don't want anything that he has. And they don't listen when I talk to them and I tell them that this isn't a good idea. What are you going to do when you have a baby and you're getting divorced? Oh, we'll never get divorced. Really? You're getting a prenup because he's worried. What if you get a divorce? You have to advocate for yourself. You have to be honest. You have to be fair. But ending up after any kind of a marriage with nothing is not fair. It's not only the men. There's lots of wealth. Women have lots of wealth. They have inherited wealth. They have wealth that they have accumulated. And I can understand wanting to preserve that. But after 20 years of marriage, 30 years of marriage, there needs to be some kind of security that the other person has. For a year, they don't have security. Who cares? It's been 12 months. No one understands till they have a baby how it takes over your entire life. You're talking about a life. And when you're getting married the first time, you haven't had that much life. Okay. And you need to think about or hear all these horror stories from older women and older men They don't want to lose everything that they have bought. And then there's the issue of commingling. You need to know all this before you get married. You need to consult a family lawyer before you get married. Or if you're going to have a prenup, you'll both consult a family lawyer. Not a free consultation. They need to pay for it because they need to go with their pens and papers and take notes so that they can discuss it afterwards. That's all.
The haves, their concerns are, I don't want to be taken advantage of, right? They're saying, I have all this wealth and I want to make sure that we preserve the wealth in a way where this is truly about love, right? They're saying, I want to make this about love and not money. Prove it. Sign a prenup. And the have-nots are saying, definitely, I'll prove it. I'll sign this prenup. And I love what you were talking about, how most women are just like, oh, I'm not here for money. I'll just sign whatever. In that scenario, for the have-not, what negotiations and bargaining chips do they have to play against the have-not? Because the typical dynamic is the have has the power, right? So they're playing offense while the have-not is playing defense. So I know the have has to be empathetic, but really it's the have-not's job to come back and say, hey, if I quit my job and I stay home to raise our kids, every year I stay home, I want you to pay my salary in a separate account, that's mine, plus 10% for inflation and 3% for my
cost
bonus,
of living increase.
Cost of living. Exactly. Can you give some more examples for the have-not on how to go up against the have, if you will, and make sure we have a collaborative conversation?
The standard boilerplate, no alimony ever. Everything that we get, everything that I had before, all the rental income, all the income, all the investment income, everything is all mine. And all my income and everything that I do is all mine. Everything is mine. My pension is mine. My retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs are all mine. Everything is mine. That's the boilerplate. My best piece of advice is that it is the couple who is going to get married, get their advice from each of their lawyers, and then they go behind their backs, which is what they should do because they want to have a future together and discuss their future together and make the decisions. The lawyers are advisors. They're just advisors. And you should discuss all of these little things so that you can decide what is best for you. What is best for your future? How do you want to, and this is the time for the imbalance, the power imbalance to be addressed. Am I going to go through, so the have-not says, am I going to go through this marriage where you make all the decisions and I have nothing to say? You already have accumulated enough so you don't have to save anymore. And so I'm going to be left at the age of 45, at the age of 55 with nothing. How am I going to live? How am I going to live if I'm out of the workforce or even if I'm in the workforce? There's so many variations. You can just say that the money that I would have earned or the money that I do earn is going to be segregated. And that money, and we're going to live on your money. I cannot tell you how many couples want one of them to stay home. They just want one of the couple to stay home while the children are little. And they generally want to have more than one child. So they have to think about that. Just getting married and saying it is not enough. You have to open your eyes and think about your future and think about what kind of a life you want. Because deep within each person who's getting married, deep within them, they have an agenda. They have a wonderful agenda. And you need to talk to each other about it. And all the courses that you're getting into, they don't get into that. It is in the prenup phase that you get into that.
Okay, so let's say somebody does their budget and they say, okay, we're on the same page about how the finances are going to go. One thing that you said earlier was like where you are today in your prenup is not where you're going to be in 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Right.
So what do you recommend for couples to stay on the same page financially? Should they regularly talk about their budget? Should they renegotiate their prenup every 5 years? What should they do to stay on top of the
They have
financial
sunset.
snapshot?
It's not asking for something that you're not entitled to. You need to ask, don't you want me to be financially secure? Don't you care about me and love me and want me to be financially secure also? Let's talk about what's going to happen in the next 10 years. Do we want to have children? Do we not want to have children? Do you want me to go traveling with you? Do you want me to help you in your business or in your personal life? Or do you want me to, do we both? This is what we both. My clients, the haves, the have-nots, talk to their fiance and discuss it, and they come to reasonable conclusions. This one gives a little this way, this one gives a little this way. I write prenups where the other party gets nothing. I write them. It's the boilerplate. But during the negotiations, whoever it is that I'm representing, I give them advice because I tell them that this is terrible, that they have to think about fairness, that they have to think about the other side and that the other side's welfare. What's going to happen in 10 years? Well, all the things that we've discussed. And then they go back and they have a better idea because today this is what they want, but it's not necessarily what they're going to want later. And to negotiate in 10 years, it's not happening. It's not happening. And for the wife to have in the back of her head, or the husband to have in the back of his head, that the house is never going to be his. So he's done everything in the house, taking care of everything, taking care of the children, and it's never going to be his. That's what the prenup is supposed to prevent on both ends, because resentment and toxicity in the marriage, you don't want to start out with a prenup resentful. And you need to start your prenup early, not the month before. You need to start it 6 months before or the year before, where you're talking about it so you can think about things and grow as a person and be a better partner and be a better husband and a better wife, because you understand and you've thought about what your future is going to be like, and it'll make both parties more secure and happier, much happier, to know that you don't have to worry and you're being taken care of. Being adored is wonderful, okay? There's nothing like contentment. There's nothing like the satisfaction of helping someone else, especially when they're your beloved. Because I believe in marriage. I believe in love in marriage. I've been married for 43 years. I think that prenups are a really great idea. And I think that anyone who has a financial future should get a prenup. Talk about things, because everybody has something.
That's a great point. Asset and liability. It's not just the people that with the haves that have assets. It's the people that have haves and they have liabilities, right? I think that's a really important thing. At HelloPrenup, we see a lot of couples where they actually come in saying, I have this student debt that I don't want to put on my partner, which is why we want to get a prenup. They generally have very equal salaries. They're on the same page about everything, but they just want to make sure that they don't put that debt on their partner because they don't want to start the marriage off with resentment or this overhead of like, what happens? And now I have to start collecting that debt for myself. So in the vein of finances, I'd love to talk a little bit about taxes because it is that time of year and I think it's an undertouched subject. So talk to me about what it means when you get married and how your taxes are affected.
The best financial tax category that you can be in is married filing jointly. Married filing individually is the highest tax bracket, and jointly is the lowest. And then you have singles. So getting married is good for taxes.
What would be the reason why somebody would be married filing separately?
Their spouse is in a business where they are not declaring their income, or they are over subtracting expenses, and they don't want to get caught. The other thing is that some people are unable to run their lives and do their taxes. So one person wants to do their taxes on time, the other doesn't, so they file singly. Once you sign that joint tax return, you are liable. You are liable for all the money that is owed and all the penalties and interest for cheating on your tax return.
How do taxes relate in a prenup? Do you talk about taxes before you get the prenup?
An individual can give gifts of $17,000. And if it's one individual, he can give one individual who has a son, a daughter-in-law, and a child. So each gets $17,000 a year. If you get married, you can put in the prenup that you can give $34,000, so that you will be giving the money, but your spouse will be lending their ability to give $17,000. So each gets $34,000. So that is what you want to do. And then there are a number of things that you can do. If you have you'll need to consult a probate attorney.
There's a trend right now on TikTok where people are like, I'm just not going to pay my taxes anymore. There's no way that there's enough people in the IRS to come after every single one of us. What do you say, guys? Let's all band together and just not pay our taxes. What happens if you don't pay your taxes?
You can go to jail. You can go to jail. Okay, you can go to jail. I pay my taxes. You pay your taxes. I think everybody should pay their taxes. And then there'd be enough money to have the government squander it.
Do something with it. Exactly. So thank you so much, Denise, for your time today. We loved having you. If you could sum it up, what is the one piece of relationship advice you would give to engaged couples today?
If you love each other, there's a wonderful future ahead. You just have to plan for that future. And there are a few little tweaks that are going to make you a little bit uncomfortable and awkward, but you got to talk about the money. You've got to talk about your budget. You've got to talk about your assets and your liabilities. If you're getting a prenup or you're not getting a prenup, it will relieve the both of you so that you don't end up afterwards looking at each other and then having the issues in the same discussion that you were going to have before. It's better to understand everything before. Planning is the most wonderful thing that you can do. Planning for a family, planning for retirement, planning your vacations, planning everything. You have to know how much money you're going to have for that. And you need to know what your liabilities are, because you need to know if you first want to pay off all that student debt or other debt. So love means being truthful and honest and having no power imbalance. That's what love means. And better to do it before the marriage than after the marriage. You want to have a wonderful honeymoon that goes on and on and on for the first year, instead of looking at your bills and trying to figure things out. So I'm going to end this by saying that I love love. Okay, I love love, and I love prenups.
Well, thank you so much, Denise. We adored you, and thank you so much for your time. Until next time, thank you so much.
Thank you.